Thank you very much, Griselda. Bells have been ringing out at cathedrals across France in honor of Notre Dame following Monday's devastating fire. They began to toll at the time the flames broke out at the famous Parisian landmark, which its rector claims will mean it has to close for 5 or 6 years.
Africa, home to the fastest growing youth population.
The African kid goes through similar problems. It doesn't matter where in Africa you are.
It is predicted that by 2030, the number of young people on the continent will increase by 42%.
But so much good lies in the different political parties that they can put it together and create a South Africa we have never seen before.
But are they interested in the politics of their countries?
As a conscious citizen, I have to make my mark.
They all make promises, so I don't know which party will deliver on their promises.
Watch African Perspective on Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
So 9:30 tonight with your African Perspective anchor, Tsepiso Makwetla. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Francis.
So you're looking at this flare-up in Sudan. Can you just explain sort of some of the context around that for viewers?
So it's no longer a flare-up, Francis. It is a fully scaled explosion, if I may call it that, because what we've seen is after months and months of agitation and protests that the civilians of the Sudan, especially in Khartoum, have overthrown Hassan Omar al-Bashir as president. We've seen the military do that in the form of a coup, and I'll use that term in inverted commas because we've seen some of these developments on the African continent, some saying it is an outright coup, some saying, well, it is a takeover as caretaker of the civilians. But what we've seen now in Sudan is that there's a military council that has taken over. They said they're going to be at the helm for the next 2 years, and the civilians are obviously saying this is not what we fought for. But the developments being now that this is a matter that is before the United Nations, the Security Council. Our correspondent there, Sean Bryce Peace, will give us more details about it. But what we do know at the moment is Omar al-Bashir has been moved to Koba prison in the capital Khartoum. He's set to be in a high security facility in solitary confinement, and the latest being through the foreign minister of Uganda is that they're saying if Hassan Omar al-Bashir seeks asylum, that Uganda is willing to consider offering him that. So very interesting developments on that.
But the army that he once controlled, it is the same regime.
Well, this is
would have to agree.
This is what the SPA, that is the Sudan Professionals Association, is arguing, that this is why they don't want them as the so-called transitional government. They couldn't be a transitional government because they see them as part of the regime. Now, you know that through the protests, they've been continually calling for a roadmap, a process that will clearly outline who is going to take over as part of that civilian government and the phases that were to take place. That has not happened. The army now saying that it's going to be in charge for the next 2 years. The AU rejecting this, by the way, saying that civilians have to be listened to. Uganda is saying while it's willing to give Hassan Omar al-Bashir asylum, they are insisting that it must be through civilian rule that the transition takes place. So we'll be looking at that. But let's also tell you about what's going to very quickly happen in East Africa. We'll be giving you an update on IGAD warning of 23.4 million people in the Horn of Africa facing starvation or possibly death. And today we'll be speaking about youth, whether or not they are interested and are a major role player in South Africa's elections.
All right, don't miss it. Tsepiso Makwetla with African Perspective at 9:30 tonight.